Off the western tip of the Isle of Wight, the Needles have been a landmark for sailors for centuries. They stand sentinel to one of the most deadly and dangerous stretches of water around the British coastline. And the sea is an ever-present force in the life of the island, a contrast to the softness and greenery of much of its gentle landscape. Popular mythology has it that there's room for all the world's inhabitants on the Isle of Wight, if you allow 1 square foot per person. Such an invasion might not be welcomed by the average islander, if indeed there is such a character. For the people of the island are private and protective of their boundaries, and not keen to mix it on the mainland. Historically, the island has been seen as a stepping stone to the conquest of Britain. The French raided it frequently, and in 1377, they devastated Newtown on the northern shore. It hasn't recovered to this day. And in the Second World War, anyone coming to the Isle of Wight had to have a special pass and identity card because of the vulnerable frontline radar installations and the pipeline under the ocean called Pluto, which supplied fuel to our troops in France. It is, nevertheless, a place of great physical beauty. Gentle farmland, fertile pastures, and sturdy manor houses. But it's perhaps inevitable that several of the people we chose to represent the island in this film, which was shot during 5 late April days, should be sailors or fishermen, like Dave Wheeler and Jim Blake, who live and work at Steep Hill Cove near Ventnor, on the southeast coast of the island.
Well, we catch anything that swims, really, but, you know, different nets catch different fish. You know, get a lot of mullet and whiting, stuff like that.
Yeah?
Mainstay is shellfish, of course. You know, crab and lobster, that's the mainstay. But, you know, whatever extra comes along, you've got to be equipped for everything. You've got to have nets to cover any type of fish. You know, we drift for sprats, herons, or anything like that. It makes the life a lot interesting, but at the same time, you've got to have a lot of equipment. We started off with withy pots, you know, in the days of when fishing was hard work then. Now with the age of nylon, which has crept in, I suppose, the last 20 years, it improves things and makes your gear more efficient. And we're jolly fortunate, both of us got 2 boys, interested in fishing. You don't want to go on the dole. They could earn more on the dole, I expect, some days. Our family comes from Ventnor, but I moved out here about 20 years ago and made a good move, I think. It's an awkward place from fishing-wise. You're in the worst place in England, not for getting afloat, especially anything to do with high water. But you're away from the vandalism side of it, and you can leave your gear here reasonably well. Anywhere else, you know, you've got to strip your boats bare, otherwise it all gets pinched. It's you know, a pretty little place. If you can put up with the bad days, you know, you appreciate the good ones, that's for sure. We don't miss many days, you know, it's a scrabble. Sometimes you get cold, you get wet. You know, it's part of life, isn't it? It can be worrying times, no doubt about it.
It's always the unexpected, you know, the freak waves and all the rest of it that you get.
David's father always used to tell me, he used to say, it doesn't matter how high a tide is, you can always have conditions here where perhaps a lot worse, which is quite true. You find
always a higher tide to come, he used to say.
You've got to have a boat here so you can come in on a bit of, you know, a bit of beach pretty fast and get it up out of the water quick. You can't have nothing too heavy. years, you know, we've sort of got a bit more modern. We got faster motors. You can stick a bit more weather. Difference between oars and sail, you know, you were limited, but now you can, surprising what you can put up with out there. Sea comes in a lot more than whatever it used to. You get a lot more water in here. You know, the beach gets lower and lower each year, and your seabed goes down each year. Never wild days, which everywhere does, but we didn't have to dodge a lot of the bad weather, the rain and that. Might moan some days as it keeps on raining, but other places are jolly sight worse. Well, it's just a way of life, isn't it? If you're happy at Summit, what do you want to go for something else for? Join this rat race on the mainland.
Daddy Neptune one day to freedom did say, if ever I live upon dry land, the spot I should hit on would be Little Britain. Says freedom, why that's my own island. Oh, what a...
Today, although the fishermen use outboard motors in their sleek hand-built boats, there's still good work for sailmakers who cater for the pleasure boats and yachts, which have made the town of Cowes the most famous name in the boating world. One of these skilled and stalwart individualists is Hilton Mortimer, who has his sail loft in the River Yar boatyard, just across the estuary from Yarmouth. Hilton, how did you get into this business of sailmaking in the first place?
Just seeing all the big yachts come from Cowes up to Southampton when I was a boy, and I started my apprenticeship at Camphor Nicholson's more over 30 years ago. Had the good luck to work with some very good craftsmen. I suppose they've left a little of the skill behind. Most of them are gone now, but then I decided that I'd like to go on my own here.
Why does the yachtsman come to you for a suit of sails?
Well, I suppose the fact that I have very small premises means I've got low overheads, and of course I'm more competitive. I do in fact still hand-finish sails because I haven't got the capital to invest in a lot of elaborate machinery which modern sailmakers are now using. Being in that situation, I do find it's better to carry on with traditional work. It does preserve it, and it's a better sail. The first principles, once you've taken the drawings from the sail plan or measured the spars of the yacht, is to have a large floor area to mark the sail out. Now, I haven't got that. I have the favour of being able to use the local badminton club, which has plenty of room, and once the sail's set out and cut and marked up, I'm free of large premises. And then I can then carry on in this small place, machining up and doing the handwork. Hand roping, and of course working the bronze rings in by hand instead of, as I said, the machine press tool takes a long time, but it's a superior job.
The ancestors of men like Hilton Mortimer, Jim Blake and Dave Wheeler may well have made part of their living salvaging the wrecks which were commonplace on the dangerous shorelines of the island, back of the Wight. It's always been a notoriously dangerous place for ships. And today, one of the busiest men on the island is the coxswain of the Yarmouth lifeboat, Dave Kennett, who with his crew is on constant standby. You're an Isle of Wight man, I believe, Dave, aren't you?
Yes, that's right, yes, yeah.
Whereabouts?
Freshwater Bay.
And you've been concerned with boats one way or another all your life, have you?
That's right, yes. Started off at Freshwater Bay with the few boats down there, and then graduated through trips around the Needles and operating down there, and then eventually going in the merchant service, travelling around the world. In 1970, I took over as coxswain, and that's in about possibly 12 years now, 12, 13 years. Being a lifeboatman, you have to change completely. You have to sort of give up the travelling life. You have to establish yourself in such a place like Yarmouth, which is nothing finer really. Yarmouth's, to my mind, is one of the nicest places that anyone could live. My life revolves around the lifeboat. You're on call 24 hours a day, and apart from holidays when our second coxswain takes over, you're tired all the time. We carry a complement of 7 crew. That's the coxswain, second coxswain, mechanic and assistant, with 3 crew members.
Bridge, Winners. Yeah, Winners. Scramble the helicopter, urgent.
Yeah, roger. Yeah, Southern Coast Guard, Southern
Coast Guard, Yarmouth lifeboat, over. Yarmouth lifeboat, Southern. Yeah, Yarmouth lifeboat, casualty needs evacuation. Scramble helicopter, please. Scramble helicopter, over. This is Southern Coast Guard, roger, would it?
Should we require a doctor, we've got a very active doctor, Dr. Reed, at home, and he's available most of the time. We're very fortunate on the Yarmouth lifeboat. We've got a very splendid crew. We train every Sunday. As you can see, everything works well. The helicopter works well with us. We have to lay into the wind 30 degrees off, so that the helicopter can fly into the wind and see the structure of the lifeboat, so that the crewman can guide the winchman down on the deck. Obviously, one of our proudest rescues was in 1975, when we rescued 5 London policemen. They had left Cherbourg on a southeasterly wind, force 5, heading for the Needles. When about 1 mile from the Needles, the wind turned round to the north and blew about force 10. I always remember it was a terrible night, raining like anything, and it was very, very fortunate. We found that these chaps had lots of red flares, and we followed these red flares, and they were literally blown out into the channel 15 miles. We had quite a big sea running out there, and we had to get alongside and take them off. Our mechanic, Bob Cook at the time, he did quite a brave rescue by pulling a chap out of the sea over the side. We then had to make our way back, but that was a silver medal rescue.
This stretch of the Isle of Wight coast, which has proved to be the most hazardous for shipping, is to the southwest of the island. The winds and waves lash this shoreline in foul weather, and the shallows are littered with wrecks. Paradoxically, if you travel east a few miles towards Ventnor, you come to the part of the island which has arguably the most temperate and sheltered environment in the British Isles. As a result, plants, flowers and trees flourish here as nowhere else in this country. And this oasis of warmth is protected by the fact that over the centuries, the cliff face has slipped towards the sea, creating an upper and an under cliff, the one protecting the other from the elements. Here in the Ventnor area grow bananas, which would reach maturity if they weren't picked too early by visitors, dates, palm trees, cycads, and a tropical jungle of exotic plants. It is indeed a naturalist paradise. Even the less protected parts of the Isle of Wight, like Newtown, seem to enjoy a better climate than the mainland, and to produce their spring flowers earlier and in greater profusion. And the red squirrels, of which the island is justly proud, put on a special April show for our cameras. This elegant early purple orchid joins more familiar spring flowers in putting on its seasonal display. Frank Heap of the National Trust takes a special pride in trying to encourage the growth of such woodland flowers, as he and his team revive the ancient skills of hedging and coppicing. Frank, we're standing here in town copse. Now, what exactly does this word copse mean? Can you tell me a bit more about it?
Well, it's a small piece of woodland which is cut over a few years' duration, usually about 8 years, regularly, and each time it's cut, it grows up again. In fact, it grows up more densely than it did before. So it's a continually renewable resource that an ancient village would have relied on. And a small village like Newtown would have had a copse very similar to this, which most of its building materials, fire materials, general home equipment would have been taken out of. Already we can see a great bloom of bluebells and primroses, and the quicker we're out of the copse, the better they'll do, really. So we try and move through as quickly as possible with as little disturbance as possible. Since we've been cutting this area, we've begun to realise that it is an incredibly useful resource even today. We've started to make hurdles. You start with a mould board in which you put the vertical sails, which are made of split hazel, slightly stouter stuff than the rest of the hurdle. And then, having split a large quantity of fairly thin hazel material, about 1 inch in diameter, preferably straight material, that makes it a lot easier. And you weave it in, rather like basket making. It's very similar in many ways. The trick is, one, to be able to twist the ends in so that the whole hurdle is locked in, and two, to end up with a hurdle with all the ends tied in as well, so that when you pick the hurdle up, it doesn't fall apart. We've been fortunate in having folk who've worked on the land all their life to come along and show us how it's done, and a variety of old crafts have come to light again, which we're trying our hand at.
Dredging for oysters has probably been part of the way of life in the Isle of Wight as long as coppicing. It's almost certain that oysters were gathered here in Roman times. Today, oyster and clam farming is a busy commercial enterprise, which in the view of Derek Woodford, still owes something to its ancient past, and which even today can be a very tricky business.
I do know that apart from frost, fresh water, too much of it in the river, the shellfish, oyster in particular, has so many predators. It's a prey to practically everything in the sea. You have to dredge the oysters, and in the life of an oyster, it sometimes moves, several times. As you grade it through, you find the smaller ones not ready now, but they're put down in a separate bed and dredged in a year or two's time. When we've got them in our beds, and when they've grown onto an established size, you investigate the condition over a period of time. They're then dredged and taken to the shed and graded and placed in our tanks in trays, where they're cleansed further, and then they're ready for the markets. The clams, of course, it's a different business. They come from Southampton waters. The water is polluted there. Of course, they're not graded or anything like that. They come straight from the fishing boats. They're relayed in this river in bags, so they're different to the oyster. they've done their stint in the river, they're taken to the shed and graded, and then they go into the tanks as well. And then,
Like the oysters?
yes, very similar. During our time working with clams, we've found a fossilized clam, which has been suggested is anything 60 million years old, which rather suggests that if the Americans have given them to us in recent years, we gave them to them originally.
And in the mouth of the River Yar, Andy Bird at Puffin Fisheries is the temporary caretaker of a whole variety of less protected sea creatures.
The island is fortunate. I suppose it's got some of the best lobster fishermen in England. Small boatmen too, you know, a lot of them. Steep Hill Cove and the...
What, the Wheelers and the Blakes?
That's right, yes.
My word,
yeah,
yes, we've been talking to them.
They come into us. And beautiful stuff, you know, lovely local prawn, lobster, good crab. Oh yes, we got some, you know, jolly good fishermen. The fishermen won't even tell me where the best place for lobsters are. But most of them are around the back of the Wight, from the Needles, St Catharines. The crawfish that are in the tank we bring up from the West Country. You don't get many crawfish east of the Eddystone Light. They're mostly down the West Country. St Ives Bay, the Isles of Scilly. That's a beautiful crawfish. You know, she's buried she. That's her eggs there. Better than caviar. Nice, good heavy one. Beautiful antenna. We bring so many a week up, and we find they sell quite well, although they're very pricey. Well, that's a fine, great cock lobster. He's probably been roaming around the seabed, I should think, for about 18 years or more. Beautiful condition. Make a terrific meal. I suppose he's worth somewhere, about 24 pounds. See his little swimming legs going there? Yeah, very handsome cock lobster. I think this one was caught off the Needles somewhere. I got two like it, yes, they were. They were caught down off Scratchell's Bay somewhere, I think, these two. I've got another one here somewhere. Well, these are the prawns that are brought in from the Ventnor side of the island by the Blakes and the Wheelers. And as you can see, they're a beautiful, heavy, local prawn. Very beautiful when they're cooked. All alive, though.
In April, the Isle of Wight is vibrant with birds, beasts, fish and flowers, all coming to life with the spring. But one of the most charming creatures we discovered during our filming seemed unaffected by the seasons or by the changing temperature. Nothing but an ordinary British donkey, submitting to the same task that donkeys have been performing in Carisbrooke Castle for nearly 300 years, and probably a lot longer. Pulling water by rope and wheel from a 160-foot well. Not, of course, to provide the thirsty people of Carisbrooke with fresh water, but patiently to cater for the Isle of Wight's most valuable April phenomenon, the start of the tourist season.